are you going to church and why is everyone else? This religion was supposed to be dying. What the heck's going on?
People actually like to feel they matter. There are malevolent versions of this as well. Part of the historical appeal of fascism is that it's very big on sacrifice, and it lets you hate a lot, which provides a very, very quick hit of meaning production.
Religion is weird, and Jesus is weird and radical and strange, and that's part of the excitement of it. And we all have weird, difficult things that we believe because we're very weird and wonderful species too.
People need meaning, and the secular world didn't come up with the goods. Why can a purely secular world not come up with the goods?
I'm not sure there is such a thing as a secular culture or a completely secular culture.
Like Jordan Peterson and Nigel Farage on the stage talking about Christian values without themselves being Christian. So I was like, well, what's going on there? This is a code for, I think, white supremacy.
Here, just popping by with a quick heads up. This episode of Re-enchanting, recorded live at Bradford Literature Festival, does have a couple of instances of swearing. We have bleeped them out so that nothing can get in the way of you enjoying what is, I think, one of the most special and profound re-enchanting conversations we have ever had. So happy listening.
So hello and welcome to Re-enchanting. This is the podcast brought to you by Seen and Unseen. I am Belle Tindall. I am co-hostless for today, which is sad, but today's episode is something very special. I am so excited. I was giddy on my way here because we are at Bradford Literary Festival to record our first ever live recording of the Re-enchanting podcast. And that means that before me, we have some company. Yes. Oh, you nailed it. We have a wonderfully very real audience right in front of us. And when I was putting this session together, when Ella, our producer, and I were dreaming it up, in my head, I had this A-list panel that I wanted, like the trio of my dreams. I was putting it together and I emailed the names over to Ella and I was like, if I email out some invitations, if one of these people say yes, like this conversation will be worth its weight in gold. Their presence will make so much of a difference. Just one. I just want one of them. And I sent the emails out and we have all three of them here. Come on, I'm so excited. Yes. So you've already done it, but Bradford, please, would you give a huge welcome to these tender and these profound writers, thinkers, feelers. We have Chine McDonald.
No.
Yeah. We have Francis Spufford. And we have Lamorna Ash. Yes. Okay, so you have actually, and this is total coincidence, you've actually all been re-enchanting guests before, which means that the first question, always our first question, because we're usually at Lambeth Palace Library, but this time we're at a literary festival. We're at a literature festival, so I think it's just as apt being here. Our first question is always just to ask you what you're reading at the moment, basically because I write them all down and then I read them. So Chine, let's start with you. Tell us what you're reading at the moment.
As ever, I have several on the go.
Yeah,
but
always the
my
answer.
My main one is Doppelganger by Naomi Klein, which is a fascinating exploration of basically our polarized world through the lens of Naomi Klein writing about her doppelganger, who is Naomi Wolf, who people get confused. A fascinating, excellent book.
That's a good one. Francis?
Also several on the go. I've got an enormously fat and excellent historical novel on my bedside table called Meanwood, which is indeed the name of a suburb of Leeds, but is set in the 17th century when it's an actual wood by a writer called Nicola Griffiths, who came from Leeds. It's got St Hilda in it, but not being very saintly. Yeah.
That's such an intriguing review.
It's really good, but it's very long, and if I go on about it, the owl pass.
Sure.
Good.
Okay, we'll leave that there then. Lamorna.
Mine is also very long. It's Robert Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy, which is the best book ever written. This is my maybe second or third read, but I go back to it when I'm starting a new writing project. And it's a 17th century text by a scholar who's very melancholic, and he writes a huge treatise on melancholy, looking at both like symptoms, causes, cures, that is insane and encyclopedic and bizarre and fun. And the index is wild. And you go from, one cause of melancholy might be heartbreak, but another might be that you're a werewolf, and everything is taken as seriously as everything else, and it's just fun.
Yeah. Do you go back to it when you're about to start writing because you want to write a little bit like that?
I think in this particular new bit of like book writing, I'm looking at it for structure and seeing what I can take from it there. So I've not used it before for writing, but this time I was like, I think it's time.
So good. Okay, 3 excellent answers. And I haven't read any of them, so they are all going on my list. Okay, I just want to dive straight in, to be honest, because this conversation, as it says up on our lovely slide there, is belief in the age of crisis. Now, we professionally, personally, all 4 of us, we lean into the Christian story, and that is how we sort of see and experience the world to different degrees, standing in different places in regards to that. So the first question, and I want an answer, like I want to hear it from all 3 of you, is what is your understanding of what belief even is? Like from your vantage point, whether that be professionally or personally, knowing that because you're writers, like they bleed into each other. What is your understanding of what belief even is? Should we go like the other way down? We start with you.
Sure. Well, my way of understanding anything seems to be through what other people say to me. And I have maybe two examples of recently people using the word belief in interesting ways that have illuminated something for me. My friend was talking about his long-term girlfriend, and he said, it took me about 3 years. I knew she loved me, or she told me she loved me. It took me about 3 years to believe she loved me. And I thought I was so interested in what that is as a kind of shift semantically of like, it's as if it takes it to this higher plane of not just something that's a speech act, but something that has this like deep integral truth. And I really like that of like belief. It sort of requires both of you at once. It's not just something someone says, it's that you take it in as well. And I guess like believe in communities, it's never a solitary thing. It's something about that shared experience together. And the other one is someone I was interviewing for my book about Christianity, and she told me, and she's a pastor, a Nazarene Christian, and she said that sometimes she completely loses her sense of belief, and she feels like a shit pastor because she's like, oh, sometimes I don't believe at all, and she always says a line from the Gospels, which is a man whose son is very sick, and he says, "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." And I think of that as this like fascinating to put those two together, because it's suddenly, the way I thought about it is it cracks open the meaning of belief, where in that case, belief is actually maybe more like I hope to believe, or I need to believe. And so that actually belief, if you crack it open, there's actually more to it, which is like a kind of longing, instead of just a kind of a statement like, I know this is a table, I believe this is a table, does something different, and stranger is actually harder to hold on to.
Nailed it. Okay. Francis.
Okay. I think of belief as a kind of disposition to trust what you can't prove, which is something that everybody does all the time about something, because the world as we pass through it is not a series of abstract propositions. It's a series of relationships and responses and things felt, including those sort of marginal things at the corner of your eye where you're not quite sure what it was you just saw. There is, and we are regrettably Christian, so we are probably going to keep referring back to Christian stuff here as one of our main go-to resources, and St. Paul has got belief or faith down as the evidence of things not seen. substance of things hoped for, which is a pair of paradoxes, because evidence, as noticed in the word, the vid in the middle of evidence, is to do with what you see. So it's the seeing of things you haven't seen, and things hoped for are future things which haven't arrived yet, so don't actually have any substance. Which sounds like two elaborate ways of talking about nothing, but it kind of isn't. That you can quote that line to people who believe in one thing or another, and they recognize that there is a human situation and a psychology there, a way of leaning on and leaning towards the stuff that you couldn't prove but find you need anyway, and it happens even when you're not willing it or feeling sure of it. There is the belief that happens when you're only wanting to believe, rather than the belief that's happening when you're feeling this glorious assurance that the thing you believe in is really there. But it's very human to believe, and I suspect that if we're not believing, then some vital part of us is being amputated. That doesn't mean that everything you believe in is good. But
yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. I also want "regrettably Christian" written on a T-shirt.
Can I have it on the back of the T-shirt, so only when I'm walking away?
Yeah, so it explains everything as you walk away. Sure. Finny.
These are just such good answers, and I'm just kind of thinking and contemplating. I think there's something for me in thinking about where belief happens in the body. I was noticing it as we were talking about it. There's almost, I know something here, I believe something here. It reminded me of something that my mum said many years ago to me, which was that I'm talking about her Christian faith, and she said, "I know it in my knower." It's a something more. It's not just about the head. And I think thinking about it from a kind of sociology of religion perspective, as we do sometimes at Theos, which is the organisation I lead, Grace Davey, who's a sociologist, talks about believing, belonging but not believing.
Yeah.
And within faith communities, there are all sorts of ways in which you can kind of act out, play at the faith traditions that we belong to. And you can do that without actually believing in your knower, or knowing that kind of comes and goes, but yet you can still act it out. And maybe there's something in that choosing to act it out, that you believe that there's something, but you might still not believe it. Thinking about this kind of belief in the age of crisis, there's something in Lamorna's book, actually, which I thought she might say, but which you have a phrase which is that people are looking for something to hold on to, like towards the beginning of your book. It is the belief in something, knowing that that's a table, but believing it's a table so much so that I would, sit on it and believe that that and trust it. So something to hold on to, something that you would hold on to despite whatever evidence you might be presented with, despite other things going on. It's a kind of belief in your knower.
Yeah, thank you. 3 phenomenal answers. Francis, is there an unhelpful way to understand belief, particularly religious belief?
An unhelpful way.
Is there an unhelpful understanding
There's a
of it?
fistful of unhelpful ways.
Go on, talk us through your favourites.
Okay, to treat it as a kind of pre-modern equivalent of science, which is now out of date. And yes, as it rolled on through the centuries, the church did acquire some kind of theories around the edges about the earth going around the sun, or the sun going around the earth, rather. But that was never the point of it, and to behave as if the pre-scientific incidentals which clung to Christianity are now the whole thing, and so as enlightened modern people we naturally don't believe any of that rubbish, is to make a profound category mistake about what believing is and believing does. Another mistake would be to see it as reducible to any list of abstract propositions, even really important ones that believing people would like to get behind, like the ones in the creed, because belief is an inclination of the heart and the body and the soul, to use an old-fashioned word, rather than just the mind. It's a shape of life, which also means that it's a shape that can hold you even when you aren't feeling particularly like it, which is one of the values of it. How many more do you want?
No, that was really good. That's really good. Chine, can I ask you the same question? Because you've mentioned that you're the director of Theos, which is a religion and society think tank, and so you have your eye very much like on the public square as well, you know, in the heart of where decisions are made, and in those places, do you see any unhelpful understandings of what religious belief is?
Yes.
Can you talk
What are
us through
yours?
them?
Well, I think we saw it most vividly recently over the past few weeks and months with the assisted dying debate.
Okay.
This idea that religious belief, first of all, it is necessarily irrational,
Mm.
and it is
Yeah.
also not something that should enter into this secular
Okay.
political space that we have that has been created. And this idea that it's only religious belief, any other belief is objective, or rational.
Yeah.
So
Or neutral.
everyone
Yeah.
else is neutral. Religion is kind
A
of
sway.
obviously nuts, so therefore should be discounted. So this idea that if you are religious, that you kind of turn off your brain, and that you obviously put your brain aside when you're making decisions. So people, I think, for many people who would argue that, and lots of people have in the recent weeks. So Esther Ransom, when she wrote to MPs saying, some people are withholding their religious beliefs, they're like lying about it there, and actually they should declare it so that we know that we can discount their views.
So they're nutters and can be ignored.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
They regrettably Christian T-shirts need to go on before they go and vote.
Yeah. So I think, despite, yes, there are kind of category confusions. I think sometimes we think about belief, science, what is rational. I think you can be a religious person and also still be intelligent, still use your brain, still make decisions based on various bits of knowledge that come from different places. So it's this kind of discounting of religious belief in the public sphere that is difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting. Thank you. I saw an interview with Rowan Williams recently in The Spectator, I think it was, which is an odd collaboration, but there we go. And he sort of said that the best way to believe is just to surround yourself with people who really do. And the best way to have faith is to surround yourself with people who have it. And Lamorna, that made me think of you, because that's basically what you spent, was it like 3 years-ish doing? And the findings, the story of that is in your book, Don't Forget We're Here Forever, which you can buy upstairs later. So that made me think of you, and it made me want to ask you about, was there anyone's belief that completely rearranged the way you think of belief, and are you changed as a result of it?
I think every person I encountered changed my understanding of belief, because it is also personal, because it's experienced by each person individually. My T-shirt, by the way, says tentatively sometimes Christian. So just so I think, sorry, when you said about the Rowan Williams belonging thing, that I find that it oscillates and shifts depending on which situations I'm in. And if you're not brought up with any belief at all, it's actually it's of the many forms of belief that we have all the time, that we're fluctuating between, that we hold lots of them. I find it's very hard for me to hold on to the idea of Christianity when I'm away from that belonging, that community of belonging with it. And it all slips away so fast because it requires work. It's a leap that you have to keep on refreshing and renewing. I'm trying to think if there was anyone in particular. I mean, there was so I think actually that pastor, who was an extraordinary woman called Helen, when she talked about her own uncertainty, and perhaps this just speaks to the kind of character I am, when I was shown that there's uncertainty and doubt permitted within Christianity, suddenly it became something that felt more possible for me. Um, and then I think for me, it's this kind of accretive, very slow thing of each time I go back to the church that I sometimes attend now, but not regularly enough, it's like I'm slightly filling up the well a little bit because I'm surrounded by people who I think are quite extraordinary, and they're also different from one another. And if you were to sit down and take a kind of survey of all their different forms of Christian belief, it would be so distinct from one another, and so different from this version of belief we're told about, which is, in fact, someone was saying this to me on a podcast yesterday, who's a really interesting kind of atheist. He was like, my morality is mortality, that everything about my morality is related to mortality, which I found really cool. And sometimes I'm dismissive of new atheists. And I was like, oh, that's so thoughtful. But he was like, yeah, but Christians don't really care about the real world because they just care about the idea of an afterlife. That belief transcends anything else. And I don't think I've ever met a single Christian, even if they are kind of apocalyptic thinking Christian, who doesn't still care about the world through every single moment in their life, because we're this collective communal species that cares about one another in proximity. But yeah, I think I was changed at that thing of the coolest thing about being a nonfiction writer is that you do get to meet people you would have never met otherwise, and you sit down for an hour with someone, and you're required to, and I don't know if I could say that you're required to believe in their belief, but certainly you're required to take seriously their belief. And little by little, that does start to affect you and change you. And I don't think it's permanent, but it's a very exciting thing to happen.
Yeah, yeah. What I love about having both you and Chine here is like your book is like zoomed in. You're going so deep in place and in story and in person, and you're really getting the diversity there. And Chine, you were recently involved in some research, which has sort of been entitled The Quiet Revival, where like if Lamorna's zooming in, you guys are really zooming out and offering great insight. Can you just briefly tell us what that research found in our cultural landscape right now?
Yeah, so it was the kind of second in a series of basically polling about church going, and the previous one was done in 2018, so before the pandemic. And the latest one, The Quiet Revival, was done at the end of 2024. And what it showed was basically across all age groups, there has been an increase in people saying that they go to church. And particularly among young men, they've seen the kind of highest increase. And there's been kind of lots of discussion about it and lots of media over the past few weeks, because it kind of bucks the trend of the assumption of decline in religiosity. So if you look at the census figures from 2021, it's less than half of the population would say that they are Christian. But again, I always kind of think about that figure and I think there are not 35 million people going to church every Sunday. It's not 46%. It's more like 2%. So still, there are people saying that they're Christian when they're not. So there's something about this survey was talking about asking people whether they go to church. And one of the interesting things about that related to kind of being the idea of being surrounded by belief and that affecting you, the kind of biggest indicator of someone going to church or starting to go to church is that someone else that they know and trust and love has told them or invited them to church. There is some kind of hesitancy about it, particularly the rise in young men, because people are assuming that people are going because YouTubers are telling them to go to church. I think there is a bit of that. But I also think that the thing that actually makes people go is real people and inviting them there. So this increase is bucking the trend of kind of secularization. So I went to university to study theology in 2002, the height of the new atheist movement, this assumption that by now religion would have just died out completely by 2025. So there's this secularization theory. So this kind of contradicts that in some way. I think lots of people are critical of it and kind of surprised by it, but I think it's completely understandable. What's happened between 2018 and now a global pandemic, continued kind of economic turmoil, global instability, war, conflict. At times of existential crisis, people are going to look for something more, some meaning, some hope, or some kind of answers. So to me, it's a very it feels like a very human thing that's happening, which is people are looking for something.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. It's really interesting what is leading people to do that as well. So I read a book by the author Sean Fay. She's an incredible author, and she's got a book called Love in Exile, and it's so good. It's all about the dating crisis. Like, she's amazing at just really both sociologically looking at the kind of the difficulties in the way we date now, but then also putting a lot of her personal stuff in there as well, and kind of telling her story. Particularly because she's a trans woman trying to date, which is why it's called Love in Exile. She feels like she's exiled from from many kinds of love. And then her final chapter is called Agape, and it's all about the love of God. And so even in like the dating crisis, there seems to be this funny rumbling of like, is this it? Surely not. This can't be.
And she gets there through, which lots of people who I interviewed for my book got there through going to AA meetings, or the sense of like coming out of addiction, and that they're the first lines you learn in Alcoholics or Narcotics Anonymous, is this sense of having to give yourself up to a higher power. You can't survive without it. And I think at rock bottom again, if the thing to believe in is this thing that kind of exists above, that is sort of waiting to be tapped into, like moments of crisis do seem to be when that comes. And what she says, because she has a very private spirituality, and it's just prayer on her own, but it sort of hit in a kind of this point in her 30s where she was someone, she's so political, but sort of taught her to hold more disparate views, or like to hold them with love. And it's really extraordinary and surprising, that last chapter.
Yeah, totally surprising. I read it because I wanted her take on the dating crisis, and in no way was I expecting the last chapter to be about the love of God, or whatever that means to her in that space. I think we just desperately don't want to be the biggest thing that there is. That's what I'm thinking, because if we are, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
We desperately don't want to be at the top of the pyramid. I think for decades, maybe we've been pretending that we want to be there. We've been pretending that we are there. And I wonder if the pretending has gone too far. And we're like, oh gosh, no. Nick Cave, Saint Nick, he he was interviewed for the Times, and he was asked kind of, why are you going to church, and why is everyone else? This religion was supposed to be dying. What the heck's going on? And his answer was, people need meaning, and the secular world didn't come up with the goods. Isn't that so great? And so, Frances, I was wondering if you agree with Nick, and if so, why can a purely secular world not come up with the goods?
It comes up with lots of goods, but it's perhaps not very good at the kind of the deep goods, the things to do with meaning and discovering the kind of that human fragility is survivable, which is one of the great lessons of 12-step programs. People go in because they don't know how to cope, and find that on the basis of not knowing how to cope, there's ways to cope. I suspect as well that completely secular culture is not very good at generating a kind of rich, demanding account of what it means to be human. And people actually like to feel they matter. They like to feel that stuff is being asked of them, which is important. Difficult things that you wouldn't necessarily find it very, very easy to do. Again, there are malevolent versions of this as well. Part of the historical appeal of fascism is that it's very big on sacrifice, and it lets you hate a lot, which provides a very, very quick hit of meaning production.
Sure.
none of which I recommend. But on the other hand, there is something to do with the awful strain of being the biggest thing in the world, and the immense relief of discovering that other people are real, that certain kinds of community might be a place to kind of to rest your weary head and might provide refreshment for the soul. That in a world of a kind of a billion competing but sometimes rather shallow stories, a really good one that you can spend the rest of your life thinking about and worrying about and chewing over and changing your mind about and asking other people about is a kind of a profound gain, as opposed to kind of a nice to have shallow thing.
Yeah.
I think with given this, for me, this idea of being able to even apply a religious frame is quite a new thing.
Sure.
I still then look around at I feel like I spend a lot of time watching other people and kind of being like, what am I seeing here that's different from what I've just found in kind of Christian circles? And I just can't seem to find the secular world anywhere, because and then that separation between the two, that. And I think also, again, having not been brought up religious and seeing so much meaning and beauty in the way that my best friends do friendship, activism, community, and they do that without a religious faith, and they create stories. And I think obviously there's so much context that none of us think about that is actually religious, that we're kind of, sometimes we try and pretend there's not this whole history behind us, but it is obviously, that's there and that feeds into it. But there is also this sense of all these things of beauty and love, and seeing the dignity of other human beings and seeing that in people's faces, that feels like it's creating a larger story of that makes me question, thinking about Nick Cave, or this being fed by music and art and literature, that those things have this spiritual thing to them. And I think I probably always am wishy-washy when I say stuff like this, but I don't see the absence of that kind of anywhere entirely.
Yeah.
No, neither do I. I think that's a very good point. But then I also, I agree with you. I'm not sure there is such a thing as a secular culture or a completely secular culture. I think meaning generation is very important to humans, and we all do it all the time, and that there are a million acts of hopeful generosity going on in it. Explain why I've found myself drawn to kind of to a canonical story as the best thing to organize meaning around, given that both as a kind of endlessly promiscuous and compulsive reader and as a professional producer of other stories, kind of in many ways my money is on more and more and more different stories, not on one big one. And there are scary versions of the one big story. You should always guard against people who say you don't need anything but this. That's kind of burn the Library of Alexandria stuff, and we should avoid it.
Yeah, I remember when so Frances was my first interview on Re-enchanting back in season 1, and I remember you said a line that I quote often, where you just say, "We're meaning-making creatures. Making meaning is what we do." And to riff off that, so I'm so obnoxious, but both Lamorna and I have just got back from Glastonbury. We're in a Glastonbury haze, so if you see the dodgy sunburn, and just don't. That's where we've been.
Is that why we were being tender as well as profound at the beginning? Is that a sunburn reference?
Yes.
It might be. Yeah.
It's emotionally tender.
It's emotionally
also very tenderised at Glastonbury.
Yes.
For sure.
And so I reserve the right to talk about it for the next 6 weeks. Sorry, audience. But when I went last year, I realised that is no secular music festival. And I started to see it as more of a pilgrimage than a party, almost. As in, it's people leaving the rhythms of their lives to go and seek out awe and wonder and transcendence and communion. In a recent interview, Annie Mac said that Glastonbury gives you communion. And then she said, if you don't go to church, you need to get that somewhere. Yeah, and it's one of the most spiritual places I've ever been, and I've grown up a Christian. And there's this there's this little sort of chunk of Bible where St. Paul, he goes to Athens and he sees the way they're all living, and he sees the way they've got like altars and they're doing ritual and all of these things. And he goes and he says, people of Athens, I can see that in every way you are very religious. And I feel like you've got to be in Glastonbury like a minute and a half before you can stand in the middle and say, people of Glastonbury,
Yeah.
I can see that in every way you are very religious. And so I agree. Is there such thing as a secular space when we are meaning-making creatures, when we were designed to be religious in every kind of way? Probably not, which is really interesting. So good. Okay. So thinking about these stories that we live by then, Chine, I want to ask you a question that I think about all the time, that it plagues me. I've probably asked all of you it at some point during our conversations. There's a lot, and again, apologies for our Christian-centricness. It's just where we sit. There's a lot of people who use the Christian story without being captivated by it. So they if we're talking about knowing it in your knower, there are some people where you argue they don't, but they like it because it's a societal good, like a helpful story for certain things. And what I ask myself constantly, and what I'd like to ask you is the Christian story a good thing if it's not true? Or is it only useful to the point at which people believe that it's true? Or can it just be wheeled out as like a societal framework, even if we don't believe in any of the metaphysical side of it?
So this is the question that I kind of wake up thinking about every day.
There we go. There's two of us. We need more hobbies.
So Theos was set up, launched in 2006, and it was basically a response to the New Atheist movement to provide a kind of credible voice of Christianity. So what for 20 years we have been doing and saying is Christianity is good for society. It's good for civilization. It is good for politics. It's good for how we live together. It's a great story of what it is to be human. And we're in this kind of weird socio-political moment where Christian nationalism or the co-opting of Christian values or these ideas around Christianity and kind of Western civilization and the kind of certain people mourning the loss of that is increasingly in the atmosphere. So there was this conference in February called ARC Conference, which is an Alliance of Responsible Citizens. And there were kind of 4,000 people there, and it was run by some amazing Christian people, but it was not in itself a Christian festival, but there were lots of Christians on the stage. So I'd say it's Christian adjacent. But what you had there was people like Jordan Peterson, Nigel Farage, Kemi Badenoch kind of on the stage talking about Christian values without themselves being Christian. So I was like, well, what's going on there? It's for a particular group of people, this is a code for, I think, white supremacy. I'm going to say it. It is a kind of this idea of Christianity in contrast to Islam. And because there's kind of a lot of Islamophobia around. So the fact that Richard Dawkins, arch-atheist, last year described himself as a cultural Christian, I was like, what? Like,
what does that even mean?
What does that mean? And I think for him, if you listen to what he says, he basically talks about British things like cathedrals, Christmas,
golden syrup.
Golden syrup. That's very Christian. And for him, he's got, when he was critical of religion post 9/11, it was kind of a lot of it was Islam. So there's all this kind of coded language going on, which is actually about racism, I think. And so Christian nationalism is the thing that we are going to be working on over the next few years because it is so interesting. I think what people are kind of the positive that I think that people are looking for when they describe themselves as Christian but don't actually believe or worship or attend a church community is they're wanting to to align with an identity or a community or some kind of national patriotic identity that Christianity just happens to kind of fit within their eyes. But that to me is kind of totally different from my Christianity. And when we're talking about Christianity, we're talking about so many vastly different things. People going to play out their Christianity in very different ways. So I'm thinking about it a lot. Was your question, is Christianity good if it's not true?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I've kind of been wrestling with. It's for theos, we could say, oh, well, we've kind of done what we set out to do. Maybe it's happening. The thing that we wanted to happen in the world is happening. People are saying Christianity is good for civilization. And then it's like, oh no, but that was never all that we were saying. There is I also believe it is true. It's not that it kind of makes a real difference in people's lives. And my hope is that if Christian nationalists are being drawn to churches and they arrive at a church door, that they will hear something different or encounter difference or encounter diversity, encounter immigrants, and kind of that might shape their views. But yeah, I could talk about it for years, but I will talk about it for years. But that is the thing that I'm waking up thinking about.
I look forward to hearing you talk about that for years. Yeah.
Can I pick that up a bit?
Oh, please. Yeah, go on.
You can see ways in which the kind of historical kind of diffusion of Christianity goes on doing stuff which, whether we're Christians or not, we tend to agree was good. This is like Theos's kind of earlier themes, that the idea of human rights, for example, turn out to be historically quite specific. It comes out of kind of European Christian Democrats just after the Second World War thinking about how to avoid doing Nazism ever again. And there are other things which are kind of ethically particular to Christianity, which people think of as self-evident because they've kind of, the labels have been snipped off or eroded by time and people don't remember where they came from. But, loving your neighbor or treating everybody equally are not kind of cultural universals on the whole planet. They come out of particular histories, and there I can very straightforwardly say, kind of, whether you believe it or not, there's some good stuff there, and I'm glad it's still in circulation. But the scary thing for me is that the version of Christian nationalism is so focused on defining Christianity by edges, by it being a matter of tribe, and it's virtually uninterested in the ethical content of the religion, as far as I can see, which is not surprising because the ethical content of the religion is quite challenging and very difficult. And if someone asks Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" honestly, they don't get an answer that sounds like J.D. Vance. They get an answer which goes, "Who's the person you instinctively distrust?" Them. And as far as I can see, the least Christian emotion in the world is resentment. And Christian nationalism, a lot of it is calculated to produce resentment in industrial quantities, and that has very little to do with either the believing heart of the religion or its kind of useful kind of cloud of flying molecules which everyone else is welcome to.
It is also understandable that if, in a very simplistic reading, why people would think Christianity is British, like that they're the same thing.
Sure.
If I think about my own, my great grandfather was an Anglican priest in Nigeria, and he and my great grandmother ran a school for Christian wives. So before you got married, you go and stay with them and learn what it meant to be a good Christian wife. And what it meant was they learned how to bake cakes, drink tea, like dress in certain ways. So it's kind of missionary movements, colonialism. Like these ideas are, intertwined. So it's understandable.
And it obfuscates the real origins entirely in that way. Yeah.
Completely. Francis, you wrote a book.
I've just gone off on one for absolutely ages. I think you should ask somebody else a question.
No.
You haven't gone off at all.
No.
You
That
haven't
was
gone off on one.
concise.
I'll ask all three of you the
All right.
question, but I want to use your book as a hook.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Which
You
is
wrote this-
available upstairs at a very reasonable price. I
It's
expect.
available upstairs. When did you write it? May I ask?
2010 to 2012.
2010 to 2012. It's called Unapologetic. Why, despite everything, Christianity still makes surprising emotional sense. Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
That virtually is a T-shirt.
And you start that book by talking about your daughter, who I think at the time was 6.
Yeah.
And you say this line that has stuck in my mind because it was my life, where you say, my daughter is about to turn 6 and she's probably very soon going to realize that we're weird because we go to church. And I read that and I remember the precise moment in my life, I was probably around 6, where I realized that I was weird because my family went to church. I've written about it recently. I can pinpoint the moment where I was like, oh. And we've spoken about secularism, we've spoken about all this stuff, and I think if I think back to growing up, I have a Christian family, you know. If I think back to what that felt like, secularism, like it felt like people like Richard Dawkins were like pointing at me and laughing at me. Well, of course, what he's doing is reacting to decades where he thinks that Christians have had the upper say. Me as a 6-year-old, I don't have that context. So all I have are people laughing at me. There is no correction there. It's just all I've got. And as I reflected on it, it made me feel like as a Christian, it feels like I turn up to the table, like ready to play the game of life, only for people to tell me that I've got instructions that are from the old version. Like I am inherently out of date. Like I'm wearing an outfit that went out of season a few years ago. And I say all of that because to my joy, and I wonder if all religious people feel that, because secularism goes after all of us. And to my joy, I don't think that's the case anymore. And I wanted to get your sense on that. Really, is it still seen as weird? Is it still seen as nonsensical? Is it still seen as just totally irrational to have belief in this age of crisis? And I can ask all of you. I don't even need to start with you, Francis, if you don't want. Lamorna, kick us off.
Yeah, it's funny thinking about the very, very random chance of being born where you happen to be born. And I think that's something I've always found hard about Christianity, is that I happen to have been born English with a Quaker grandma, and the closest religion to me is Christianity. But if I'd been born in, I don't know, another country where it's more likely I'd have been born and brought up to be Muslim, then that would have been the religion. And I think that speaks to my what's it? I don't know how to put it. But one thing I guard against is like the sense of, it feels so surprising that I happen to have been born in the religion that would be the correct of the world religions, when I think for me often there's this feeling that all of them are pointing, and I know this is like a really silly thing to say to lots of questions, but this idea that they're all pointing to something larger, and this sense of like God being, and each of the religious texts is this amazing constellation map that helps you get there. So I was thinking that of, that the strangeness that you happen to be born into a Christian family, and therefore it's the framework which you have in order to receive something. But then to answer if it's still weird, I mean, certainly my friends think I've lost my mind. So I think,
So it is.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
they're becoming increasingly sweet about it. But there was a bit when they were like, are we still allowed to make jokes about Christianity? And I was like, yeah, of course, go for it. Like, knock yourself out if you want to.
Yeah.
But I think, again, and the reason they think that is because, and again, the sense of thinking Christianity is British is because we received the most paltry, almost nothing religious education at schools.
Okay.
And that's never teachers' fires thing. That tends to be, I like to blame Gove for most things, but it's this thing of being like, there's so little religious education as to think that Christianity is just one particular thing, and it's a foolish thing and a simplified version. And I think as soon as those people who think Christianity, and it is, I mean, like, religion is weird, and Jesus is weird and radical and strange, and that's part of the excitement of it. And we all have weird, difficult things that we believe because we're a very weird and wonderful species too. And we tend towards particularity and weirdness, and that's what the best art and music and everything is that adds this sort of, I don't know, colour to life. But I think, I think the weirdness then people can get on board. If they're like, that's just odd and I'm not going to engage, then that's something that actually remains almost less weird. It's sort of ordinary and boring. And when people start to hang out with people of different religions, and you start to realize what that looks like and feels like, and the intensity of it, and the beauty and the strangeness and the ambiguity, then people start to become more tolerant of it. And I do think that thinking about why more young people are thinking about faith is because we're living in such a pluralistic society where you're going to come across as a kid people of loads of different faiths, much more likely in your school. And those are the people you're next to. And so it definitely starts to become less weird when you're like, there's people of 6 different world religions in my class. How can I think they're all foolish? Because, I think that starts to shift the dial a bit too.
Yeah, I think there's a lovely part in your book as well. I think it's right at the beginning. It's really what led the way into the book. And you start asking these 2 guys that you were in uni with questions like, do you believe in the resurrection and stuff like that, to try and gauge what their Christianity means to them. But actually, it's more just who they're becoming before your eyes, like the way they're moving. And then you start talking about religion as or conversion to religion as falling in love and being in love. So I think there's that to it as well. I suppose when people come into contact with something and it's like, oh, it's not as prescriptive as I thought it would be. And you're not talking from a script, you're not, it's not just ritual like I thought it would be. There's something happening within you.
Totally. I think we all start with bad questions with things that are new. You start with the most obvious questions, then you realize the unsuitability of those questions. And then you start to ask more interesting questions that feel more human. And then you sort of start to maybe submerge a bit into it to have a sense of what's going on there.
Yeah, that's so good. Francis, if you were writing Unapologetic now, would your daughter still think she was weird?
Yeah, she would. Because she does think we're weird. The days when she was 3 and on the back of my bike and would cry out to passers-by, "Are you going to church too?" are long gone. But she wouldn't call herself not religious either. And I think something is changing, and partly it's just that encounter with actual examples of anything is great as a way of counteracting stereotypes. The world is rich and complicated and fascinating. But I also think that in some ways your completely paltry religious education has served you rather well. In that there was a long period of kind of rather sterile, kind of hangover-y kind of half-life left over from cultural Christianity, which usually, I'm afraid, had the destructive effect of making people hate the stuff they were forced to sing in their primary school assemblies. And the point of peak new atheism, which is when I was writing Unapologetic, was also the point of peak cultural influence for kind of angry 40 or 50 something men who had really resented having the last dregs of English cultural Christianity kind of forced down their throats. And the last encounter with Christianity they usually had was being forced to sing Morning Has Broken and hating it. And that has gone away. And there is, as a result, there is a space in which there can be curiosity and discovery, multiple kinds of curiosity and discovery. This is one kind going on with Lamorna. But I also think that in a funny way, the world was more confident about everything in 2010. It's only 15 years ago, but it was a world which weirdly was under the impression that it had solved a number of major issues, most of which are now coming around to kind of bite us just below where it says regrettably Christian on our t-shirts. And the crisis, or polycrisis as it's now sometimes described, is making people not inclined to be snotty about things they don't immediately understand, and this is this is good. I should say that I wish a solution to all of the various elements of the polycrisis urgently, and I do not want people to be kind of wafted to Christianity on a wave of absolute despair. I'd much prefer hope, but I think one of the side effects of these being difficult times is people go, for difficult times you need good stuff. What is good stuff? And looking around.
Yeah.
I think that with I don't know, I'm thinking about Quakers in particular because I spend quite a lot of time with Quakers, but you go there because you maybe feel hopeless and you want community, and yet within there you're given the tools with which to act. So it's not just that you go there hopeless, it then engenders a change in you where you then want to make a shift in the world too.
Yeah. If you drift into a Christian church under the impression that what you're going to get on the inside is a kind of Christian nationalist, old-fashioned British tribe, possibly involving golden syrup, then you're going to be quite disappointed by the human mixture of people you find inside the doors. And there is a picture there which anyone can look at of what agape might be, of what it might not. It's not an argument. It's not a ritual, though I think I'm friendlier to rituals than you are. It's a practice of people trying their imperfect and inevitably failing best to value each other on some completely different footing from the one that goes kind of who's beautiful, who's cool, who's charismatic, who's rich, who's important, who has power over me. There is a kind of stripping down of all those hierarchical human relationships, which is available for an hour every Sunday morning. And I don't think if you go there looking for an angry tribe, you're going to be very happy.
That's true. Chine, I would love to end with your thoughts on this.
Well, I think I've been a Christian all my life, so I've always felt on the outside, like I've always felt weird. Like throughout school, most of my friends aren't Christian, and now I'm a professional Christian, so I cannot actually hide it. If I meet someone at the party and they say, "What do you do?" I run a Christian think tank. It's kind of, but it does feel like there is something different that's happening now, which there's a part of me, my personality type was like, oh, we're like cool kids now. Like we're like Lamorna Ash is writing about us, and Giles Corran is writing about his kind of giving up his atheism, and Tom Holland is, saw Tom Holland the other, it's all kind of people. There are public mainstream people who are talking about Christian faith as a possibility in a way that they weren't 20 years ago. One of the reasons why I think I loved Francis's book so much was the time it came out, which felt like a completely different time. It was like, oh, well, someone who's like a mainstream, like novelist, writer, interesting person is writing about Christianity. It's not coming from the church itself. So I think that is different now. I feel like the doors are kind of bit more open to Christianity, and that is because the world is terrible, and people are kind of looking for something, but also because we're all a little bit weird, and that weirdness is acceptable. So young people, they might be interested in Christianity, but they might be interested in Christianity alongside tarot, alongside meditation, alongside other things, because it's a kind of you do you culture. So it's much more acceptance generally.
Sure. Could we just say a huge thank you to our wonderful panel?
And to you.
Thank you, and you.
That was... I could go on, but I promised to be generous, and I will do good on my promise. So we are going to go to you. So any questions from the audience, and there is a mic that will find its way to you. Amazing. Okay, we have two in the middle here.
That was brilliant. Thank you. Just a conversation you had almost at the start where you talked about the relationship between believing and belonging. Maybe it's kind of a hangover from trying to see it as, this rational, non-rational piece. But does the connection where you were saying it feels easier to believe when you're belonging and around your community. Does that make the belief any less valid?
I
She
looked at
works for a
Chine for that.
Christian
Yeah.
think
This is
tank.
who we turn to.
As a professional Christian,
I guess
T-shirt.
as a professional Christian, I would say that I think the word validity is the place where I'm kind of like, what is a valid belief and what makes a belief valid? Because then, yes, it kind of draws towards that kind of rational right and wrong. Is it correct? Is it not correct? I think belief is just belief. I think there's also something interesting that kind of I thought of earlier, which is sometimes, even though I'm a professional Christian, I've kind of devoted my life to it. There is sometimes when I encounter belief that is so, what's the word? Strong is not the word, but so kind of forceful and so binary and so if anyone says the Bible says this or it's in the Bible, I'm just like, well, what does that mean? When I'm confronted with that, I kind of immediately kind of want to almost like be the opposite of that and just question and doubt and throw in some grey. And there's something about certainty that also makes me kind of doubt.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't think that being among other believers makes you more inclined to kind of sign up uncritically to the ideas. There are, in fact, some contradictory psychological things that go on there. When you find yourself resisting it because you're in a room full of people who agree with you. Rowan Williams, former Archbishop of Canterbury, reported as a sort of common psychological thing. I know why God loves me, but what he wants these other people for, I have no idea. But what the presence of other believers does is that it brings out part of belief which isn't a solitary act, which isn't complete without other people to do it with, the mutuality of it. And it's not that it strengthens the delusion and makes us more likely to believe any old shit, to use a technical theological term. It's that somewhere in close in to the core of the faith is a perception of what other people are. Christianity, to get genuinely theological for a moment, is not a version of monotheism which believes that God is only far away over there. It thinks that that he is closely manifested in human bodies and human faces, and that if you want to see Jesus on a regular basis, then you go to church and you look at the other people in there, whoever they happen to be, whether or not they'd be the kind of people you yourself would like. And you can't do that on your own. If you tried to practice it on your own, then those bits of your faith wouldn't get a chance to grow. That there's a kind of school for the heart involved in being with other people as you do it.
When I was reading the Gospels properly for the first time, and not in just a kind of tiny bits of passage I'd get when I was younger, or that just come into you through sort of osmosis.
Weird, aren't they?
It's so weird. But I think I was surprised by how peopled it is, how crowded it is, and that so much of the Gospels are Christ going to people and saying, "Follow me," and he doesn't just ask for one person; he immediately grows a group of disciples, and that therefore it's like always done in a communal way, and doesn't exist without that. And if he didn't need that, then he wouldn't have come and spoken to people and brought people together. And Paul wouldn't have written letters to lots of people saying, "Come with us." So I think that yeah, I think I also got told this nice line by a priest where because I suppose there's different kinds of conversion. There's like instant conversion, then there's this slow version of it. And someone told me that he's a priest, and this young person came up to him and said, "I've been trying to go to church, I'm a Christian, but it's like boring and slow and nothing's happening." And the preacher's like, oh yeah, you have to do it for 25 years before anything happens. I was like, oh, that's so long. But taking really seriously the fact that changes happen slowly for loads of us. And I think that's why surveys are really hard with Christianity. It feels so against what faith is, that you then have to tick Christian when actually like you're this sort of bundle of different feelings all the time. It's quite a strange thing to have to do, that you have moments when there's peaks and there's troughs within it as well.
Yeah, wonderful. There was the gentleman just in the row in front.
It's been fascinating, thank you, watching all of you apologise for being Christians all the time.
I refer you to the title of my book.
Well, fair enough.
Apologetic.
I'm a professional Jew, okay, I'm a rabbi, so I have a different perspective. We had the Old Testament when it was still new, and before it had been taken away from us by the Christians, who then wrote their own sequel, which I don't fully understand. There is, of course, a great deal of overlap, and one does a great deal of interfaith dialogue and work and so forth. But I think in a session like this, I'd like to just look at one of the differences. And one of the main differences between, let's say, Rabbinic Judaism, forget sort of biblical and temple and priestly ritual, Rabbinical Judaism of roughly the first Christian century, and early Christianity is where the concept of original sin came in. In Judaism, it's one of the liturgies pieces we have says, oh God, you gave us a pure soul. You made it, you created it, you put it into us. Of course you can sin. Of course there are people who are very, very nasty indeed, but they can't use the excuse that they were born that way, that God made them that way. And in Christianity, it's quite the inverse, yes, that everybody can say, oh, I was born evil, but luckily I was baptized as a baby and therefore it got washed away, or something like this. Could you, the 3 or the 4, I don't know, but certainly the 3, how do you understand original sin? I think one of the problems we've had in the world in the last century is we don't understand the nature of evil.
Francis, someone I know, it might be you, came up with a phrase.
Yes.
That tackles this exact sort of thing.
Oh, the phrase, would you like it in initial form or would you like it spelled out?
Spelled out.
The human propensity to f things up, which I always, when I was doing the audiobook of my book, realised you could pronounce like somebody spitting into an iron bucket.
It's a good theological term. I use it quite a lot myself.
Indeed. The problem of evil, as you know, Rabbi, has centuries of debate associated with it, and we're not going to solve it now. But I've heard original sin described as one of the few theological propositions which you can actually confirm with the naked eye. But in order to I mean, just because people do evil acts, and there are very few people who are without evil impulses at times, and there is a Yiddish phrase for the evil impulse which I cannot presently lay my hand. That's the one. Thank you. So there is something to be accounted for there. I have never found anything useful in the full-on St. Augustine version of original sin, in which it's some sort of hereditary thing passed down like DNA from the moment when things went wrong in the Garden of Eden. All sorts of things are wrong with that, narratively, biologically, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, if you were to dispense with the theory about why, it seems to me that the what of it hangs around and can be helpful, and that human fallibility at least offers us opportunities for mercy, change, redemption, and also common human feeling on the basis of our fallibility, that a world which has assuredly good people and a few bad ones over there produces historical horrors in which you can do anything you like to the bad ones over there. Christians have done it to Jews for centuries. A certain degree of pessimism seems to me to be a kind of kindly realism about human beings, but it's not supposed to drive out hope. It's supposed to enable hope, but hope on a basis of realism. Can I send the theological question back your way? What happens on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement? Doesn't everybody go through a whole list of sins that they may not themselves have committed that year?
There are several issues in the liturgy which are to do with repenting. And the question is, what does it mean? Does it make you clean, or does it bring you back to where you were, or does it make you just where you are now and you've lost all the time that you've lost in between? And then there are several sequences in the prayer book. One of them I think that you're referring to lists alphabetically.
Yeah.
I mean, it works in the Hebrew better than in the English. We have stolen, we have murdered, we have committed adultery, we've done this, we've done that. And the idea is that everybody can say it, and then the people who have done it aren't the only ones getting embarrassed. You don't say to everybody who's done committed adultery this year, please stand up, you know.
Yeah, right.
We all say it, and that counts as camouflage.
Agreed.
And that's the issue of the community, which I think you've been all referring to, by being with other people who share your human weakness, your human problems. You can feel a little bit of uplift.
That seems to me to be extremely humane. And I think that a similar theory is supposed to be operating in the General Confession in the Book of Common Prayer, where you go, we have followed too much the devices and desires of our own hearts. We have offended against thy holy laws, and there is no health in us. And it doesn't mean everything's dark and we're all as dark as each other. It means that everyone can bring whatever it is they need to bring, and nobody gets singled out.
Commonality of humanity.
Yes.
Indeed.
More of that, please.
Hello. You touched on this earlier you mentioned, is Christianity good if it's not true? Do you feel like I think a growing sentiment that, at least I feel, that religion is something that people fall back on like a band-aid when they're going through tough or challenging times? Do you not find that concerning, that people are valuing what religion can give them over the truth of it? I mean, because none of us can prove one metaphysical reality over another one, like empirically. Is that not concerning to you, what people are getting their faith from?
Meaty. Lamorna, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, and I suppose I would never think about it in terms of concern. I guess each of us struggles with different things, and in order to survive, and we want people to live through challenging things, we go to different sources or faiths or people or places to get through things. And I think that alone, there's nothing concerning in that. That feels like a relief to me that such places that exist. You know, in my book, I met quite a lot of people who have very bad mental health problems or mental health difficulties, and the NHS being in the state that is in at the moment, they're not being. Then they're falling through the net there in spaces where they ought to be protected or looked after or helped to be brought back into full health. And then maybe they're then finding that in somewhere like a church, and you then can't ask immediately. So, and how much of that do you think is true, when it's like actually you're entering at a point of crisis, and maybe then it will grow into something larger. So I don't think I find it concerning that we fall back on things. I don't know if I'd even call it falling back on things. So I think it is seeking out spaces for mercy or for safety, and then you don't know where that then leads next.
I think I'm thinking about the inverse of that. So I don't think it's a problem for people to, in times of difficulty and crisis, look for something more and fall back on their the religion of their childhood, if that's what it is, because the opposite of that, I think, is everything's going right. I am self-sufficient. I can do everything. Humanity is great and wonderful and perfect, and this kind of idea of endless progress. So therefore, I have no need of anything else. I have no need of God, or have no need of a faith community. If I think about the times when I feel most Christian, are the times when someone I love is dying. or something terrible is happening, and I realize I have no control.
Yeah.
So therefore I'm like praying fervently. I'm kind of, talking to God more, because it's this recognition of my humanity and not my omnipotence. I think that is part of what religion, spirituality, a quest for God is about. It's a recognition that we are not it. There's something beyond.
I think it's an important principle that the need with which you go searching for a truth to hold on to does not, in fact, determine whether the thing is true. It just is or isn't, independently of the motive that brought you there. But since it is very difficult to determine whether one metaphysical kind of story of the universe is the story, is the true story, what we go on is what nourishes us when we go to it in need. And I take it to be a good sign of the fruitfulness of the thing you've gone to if it produces justice, mercy, compassion, more patience, more understanding, more peace. And I would take it as bad signs if it produced resentment, anger, impatience, a desire to judge other people and to be the one who is right about everything.
Excellent. Okay, we can squeeze in a couple more, I think. Any more questions? Yes, there's one. Oh, sorry. There's one right in the middle here, and then wherever you were heading, go there. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm trying to work out which one of my 57 questions.
That's a good sign. That's a sign of a good panel.
There's so many. I think people come to belief often through struggle. And, I've worked with some of the sort of poorest people in Leeds. I'm actually from Meanwood, so we're very excited to find out about that book. But also, we haven't really talked much about sort of joy and wonder and awe. And the Glastonbury moments, or, when you're sort of swimming in the sea and can just see the horizon, and they're kind of the moments as well that we connect. And I think a lot of people do, but they don't kind of know what to hook it on. So I'm there. I think a friend of mine did a master's, and it was based on letters. A guy had written an open letter in the Times just asking for people to write to him about their supernatural experiences. And he collected them all, and they're all in a library somewhere. But, it's amazing, isn't it? People are experiencing, God or a bigger thing than themselves all the time. I just wondered if you had thoughts on that.
The book that was my lodestar whilst writing my book, which sounds really similar to this supernatural experiences, is William James's Varieties of Religious Experience. And it's a stunning book and he talks about the idea that we know the veracity of religious experience not by its roots but by its fruits, by what it produces afterwards, and things like joy, like reintegration into the world. I think that's a useful way to think about faith sometimes as well. That sense of, I suppose, what was strange for me thinking about Christianity, I was meeting a lot of people who'd really struggled, but then I was going to these services where there was constantly sort of humor, connection, being reminded. I come out of, when I go to the church, it's a little Anglican church in London, I feel better when I come out of it. I've had some kind of funny conversation. I've had some deep conversation. Someone has done something really surprising and weird. There was an Easter service, a Good Friday service, in fact. And the church I go to, everyone's really into art, and they create a lot of art. And it's rather than the Stations of the Cross, you get to go and look at everyone's art. And someone had painted himself entirely in silver and had an umbrella, and you go under him to get a kind of Julian of Norwich style meditation on love that he would give. And it was hilarious and so joyful and bizarre. And he got there through faith, that he wanted to have this kind of celebratory, strange, beautiful moment. And again, the only way I really accessed church as a kid was going to midnight mass on Christmas, and that's a loving ritual, and the amazement at that, and going into these beautiful spaces and feeling that together. Yeah, I think you wouldn't keep going back if not for the joy. I think it feels really right for me, really true to me.
I think, yeah, we haven't talked a lot about awe and wonder, and people feel those things in the big things, the landscapes, the beauty. Like walking into the Sagrada Familia, every time I do that in Barcelona, I'm just like, wow, like this is like kind of my body's like shaking because it's just so unbelievably beautiful. But we also see it in the small things as well. So I think I went to a Beyonce concert a few weeks ago. I felt that sense of like collective effervescence, or this idea of being with other people, singing, harmonies, all these things that kind of give you goosebumps. Just as a kind of slight tangent, we are doing this piece of research on motherhood at Theos. And the reason why I mention it is because it's all about the kind of socio-political, spiritual change that happens when people become mothers. And in a secular age, there is something for many people describe when that moment when you become a mother, or even in those early months or whatever it is, where you feel something that you cannot like explain, and it is like an overwhelming sense of something. And in those moments, people start to ask different questions like, well, is there a God? What is life? What does it mean to be a human being? But they don't have somewhere to put it because they haven't necessarily grown up in a tradition that puts language around those feelings of awe and wonder and love. So yeah.
I think romantic love does do a very similar thing, this sudden sense of like this expansion in all directions.
Yeah.
And there's like more love, more peace than you expected there to be.
Yeah. Love in general.
Yeah.
Love in general. Beautiful. Yes, final question over here.
Thank you very much. And apologies, off the back of like love and acceptance, I'm going to ask more of an adversarial question.
Okay, for it.
It was more, I think, something that came up a little bit as someone who is, I went to school and got a lot of that Christian experience, like of the singing in assemblies, but wasn't raised Christian, and is now trying to discover, kind of, will go back to church, but struggles with the concept of faith. I would describe myself as being more culturally Christian, in the same way that I know a lot of people who are Muslim, who are culturally Muslim. They follow the traditions that they've been taught through their family, but also like simply don't have faith. And what was interesting is, I feel like you really have explored this idea of like doubt and trying to find it and how that can take time. But then there was almost a sense of like disparagement of this idea of like cultural Christian, and this connection to people who don't identify directly with the faith, but with the traditions or this value set. And that was somehow kind of a negative thing that kind of came across a little bit, or trying to connect it to this other thing in like Christo nationalism. And that was a bit, there's a lot of people might be trying to find faith, or just they don't lack that one bit. And it seemed almost like they're not one of us, even though they're still part of that similar group.
Great. Anyone?
I really did not mean to suggest that if you weren't kind of all the way in, that meant that you were a close bosom buddy with Mr. Farage at all. All right, or indeed that there isn't necessarily and rightly a huge productive area of kind of doubt and discovery there for you if you don't know whether you want it, but you see some things in it to value. And there's lots of good stuff about cultural Christianity, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with just loving the music if you want to do that. We'd need to have a long separate conversation about why faith feels difficult, sometimes impossible. I think people often have a tendency to think that it would mean a kind of self-loss, that you have to throw yourself down a well, abandoning your critical faculties and never having any questions ever again, or that while there are times when we all recognize that we are kind of not self-sufficient and need to be dependent and lean on stuff that isn't just us, that it would be really scary if you came across a kind of authoritarian version of that in which someone went, right, lean on me, and by the way, this is an irreversible one-way deal, and that the act of leaning and depending will mean that kind of after this you're signed up to some whole alarming package of stuff, parts of which you may find frightening, scary, repulsive, and kind of cruel to people you know and value. And I don't know how to say that's not what would happen, except that if you try it, it isn't what happens. At least it's not in my experience what happens. And if it is what happens, you're going to the wrong church, and you should leave and try a different one.
Yeah. Chine, can I go to you first about that? And then I want to end with you, because I sensed you had something to say about that idea of faith being. So, but Chine, you first, and then we'll end with Lamorna.
Yeah, I think this assumption that everyone who is a signed up Christian has this constant level of faith that is like here and doesn't waver and doesn't kind of have doubts, I think is false. I think sometimes that is a barrier to people who maybe go to church or would describe themselves as cultural Christians, but they think that they're missing something that everyone else must have. I think we're much more similar than might be thought of. I think what I was critiquing was this idea of reading something that I don't see in the Bible or in kind of Jesus's message and saying that is Christianity. So I don't think that Jesus talked about England or Britain or even this idea of that you should be patriotic. I just don't see that in Jesus's message. So it's those bits that I was kind of critiquing, but not cultural Christianity in general, or belonging but not believing. I think that's fine.
Yeah, thank you. Lamorna, you probably have a lot to say about the
I don't know in which
leap.
direction to go with it, but I think for me personally, setting out on this writing process, I was nervous about the idea that Christianity would mean that I'd have to lose parts of my life that I love. I think I had this sense that there was something punitive about it, or this sense of having to give up on things. And there's a definition by Harold Bloom, the literary scholar, who is talking about the blessings in the Old Testament, the OG, much better poetry. We all know it than the New Testament. But he describes. Sorry, I should have said that just me.
It's true.
He talks about blessings within the Old Testament. The offering that God gives is, he calls it, more life into a time without boundaries. And I just love this idea of faith as something that enriches and deepens and emboldens the life you already have. That it's not this turning away, it's like this moving forward with more things, with more experience, with more kind of frames to play with in your life. And I think once I heard that, I was like, I guess what most of us want is more life. That sounds good. A richer life, a bigger life, a more loving life. And so I think when I can touch it, which is quite rare, the idea of faith, that's what I'm looking for with it, which sounds more exciting to me.
Oh, it's reluctantly, I should bring this to a close. So please thank the panel, thank yourselves, thank the team. Let's just give everyone a nice big...
And you all.
There we go. Thank you. So thank you for joining us for our first ever live recording of Re-enchanting podcast, the podcast brought by Seen and Unseen. I've been Belle Tindall. This has been the phenomenal panel, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.